Good to meet you. Thanks for coming. I can't claim to be an expert on Asperger's, and I'm not sure that there's anyone that can claim being some sort of expert on a disorder that's on a spectrum. That means that it's broad and enormous. It's governed by personality, and often it's governed as much by what people don't know as what they do know. What I want to talk about first is fraud, to hold students accountable for their behavior. This is totally coming from me. I didn't read this in an article or anything, but it seems to me we're asking people with no legs to walk when we talk about Asperger's and putting people out in a social environment that they just can't comprehend. We wouldn't do that to someone who couldn't walk. But we do ask it of students with Asperger's. The authority that lets us do that, I think, is the fact that we actually meet with students. There are offices that don't do that. I don't think just an access model, purely access model, I don't think that would give us the authority to do that. I don't think so. But in the relationship that we build with students, and I suspect I'll use that word continually because I don't think there's any other way to do business with students with Asperger's. Having said that, let me tell you, I don't usually use this word often because I know we're in higher ed, and it has religious connotations, but there's a moral element to working with people with disabilities. There is. What do we require of them? What do we ask of them? I think about that when I work with students with Asperger's. We've had some success on the behavior realm, and I'm convinced that the reason we do that is because we work hard not to be mealy-mouthed Southerners, and I use that. To ignore that they smell bad, to ignore that they're dirty, there's something a little bit wrong with that. I might even say weird. There's just something weird about that. That's just not something that should be ignored, I don't think. So within the context of the relationship, that's the place where you get the authority to say those things and to hold people accountable for their behavior. So that's sort of where I'm coming from. Does that make sense? Okay. To female students while in the library. Joe generally keeps weekly appointments in the ODS, that's the Office of Disability Services, that's what we call it. And you have a continuing conversation with Joe regarding social interactions and verbal exchanges. What action should be taken or what action could be taken? What do you think? Just give them that information. Any ideas? I'm going to extend the scenario a little bit. Joe goes to the library for social interaction and for study, okay? He's a new student, and he and I have met numerous times. Weekly, we chat all the time. He's concerned about how he talks to other people. He wants to make friends, and so we talk about ways that he can do that. We literally write on the board. We script some of the things that he might consider saying, okay? Right in the middle of our library, there are computers, with all sorts of databases on them. And since that's kind of the central place for traffic, Joe likes to sit there. Students pass by, he speaks to them, and of course they're thinking, who's this person that's speaking to me, this stranger, right? And a lot of them are female students, and a lot of them are 17 or 18 years old, brand new freshmen, never been away from home, okay? So he's continually getting in trouble for this, okay? Parents call him. So he comes in my office and we sit down and we talk, and I say, what are you saying? Davis, I'm not saying anything. I just speak to them. I say hello and we have normal conversation. And I say, well, what is normal conversation? Y'all, I kid you not, we had this conversation continuously over 3 months before I pegged one thing that he was doing, and it was such a liability. I mean, I just got it automatically, but it wasn't until I asked him point blank. I said, go to the board and write down for me what you're saying. He says, well, I meet people, and I ask them where they're from, and which is typical. I mean, we all do that, He goes to the board, and what he writes on the board is, hi, how are you? My name is Joe. What's your name? Safe so far. Where do you live? Which is a whole different thing. Not where are you from, but where do you live, to a complete stranger who's 18 years old, never been away from home. Well, he was already under sanctions for the library. He was giving library hours, okay? Is there a problem with that? That he was sanctioned from the library? Who has a problem with that?
He was sanctioned from the library?
He could only use it during specific hours. He had to call the dean's office and say, I'm going to the library to work now. This is when I'm going to be there. Is there a problem with that?
If there was no intervention about what really happened.
The intervention was with me. We had been intervening, this was over the course of 6 months, okay? And he was subsequently, it continued. It was behavior that just continued on and on and on. He changed from saying, where do you live, to, something less, something more agreeable, okay? But wrapping his head around those nuances, that's the very thing he could not do. He just could not do that. But still we had to put the weight on him for understanding the necessity for scripting himself, or for being quiet, or for asking, okay? There is no feature of Asperger's that makes people talk. There is no feature of Asperger's that makes them do that. What it does do is this: it prevents them from knowing what is acceptable. We have to hold them accountable for that. There's no way around it. So how do we do that? This, I'm going to give you this in just a minute, but I want to talk about how we lay the groundwork, because one of the last time we hired an assistant director, she was shadowing me a little bit. That's what I think gives us all the authority to hold students somehow accountable for their behavior. And they have to. So many things come into play with that. I knew as I was talking to Joe in the first scenario, Joe was from a foreign country. He was on a student visa. He had dark hair and olive. People don't look at him as just some Joe sitting at the library. They walk in and they see someone treating them strangely, asking strange questions, and whether we like it or not, they think, Muslim? People think those things. They do. Our goal was to coach him in a way with Asperger's. And I worked 3 years to articulate this. They cannot articulate what they're missing, and we can't articulate what we have. We do it so naturally that we can't articulate it. So to explain it to somebody else is almost impossible. How do you explain the nuances between where are you from and where do you live to someone who has no experience with that? But Davis, I knew what my intentions were. I know what your intentions are too. I do know. And that's the hard part of this job, I think, of just working. Because we do know what their intentions are. They're not bad intentions. They want what all of us want. They want to speak to people. They want to be accepted. They want to move in that social sphere. And they get to. But there are limits. We impose the limits on ourselves. We ask them to do that. That relationship that we have with them is what allows us to, I think. I've had to work hard on that, because I have to tell you, it doesn't always feel good. But I'm convinced it's the right thing to do.
Is the distinction, Davis, between when a child goes off to public school for the first time and that they learn or they're told?
The two, they don't know. They don't know when it's appropriate to say, hey, let's you and I go out. Or when the first kiss is appropriate. They have no social distinctions to tell them when that's appropriate. Those are the things we miss, and those are the things that lead to behaviors, that we can't tolerate on campus often. And they're hard to wrap your head around, because we can't articulate how we do it and why, And then the other thing we battle, and this is what just kills me, and I think probably more than anything, this is why I love working with this population. I have heard so many times, the last time I had this discussion, I said, we've talked about this a whole lot, but I got to bring it up, and I know you're tired of hearing it, but I'm your friend, so I just got to say it bluntly. You stink. You smell bad, and you're going into a theater with a lot of people, and you're asking for roles, and it's worrying me because I don't think you're going to get them. People make judgments about that. Davis, my dad says that. They do not. The world's not like that. I can't believe you are so cynical. And that's what just kicks my hind end. We are that cynical. We are that cynical. We do. Yes. You know, the person that's 5 minutes late is not going to be given the same attention as the person who was 5 minutes early. We do make those judgments. We do. So it just kills me to have to say, oh, but we are that cynical. But for students to move through all of the privileges that we have, they have to know that. Which brings me to one more point. Somewhere around 22 or 23, it seems to me, I watched this happen over and over and over. They seem to have reached a maturity level and seen enough of that they're beginning to believe that, there are impressions that I don't get that other people do get. And they start asking me about it. This happens almost across the board, somewhere around 21 or 22. If they matriculate to their senior year, you'll start to hear it. And then if you follow them, you'll see from their parents or whatever, yeah, he's living in an independent apartment now. That's what makes the difference. Just belief that people do get impressions that you don't always understand. That's the only thing I found that makes the social realm possible to navigate for someone with Asperger's.
Do you think it's a brain maturation, or?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I think it's developmentally appropriate. I do. I think it's developmentally appropriate that it happens someplace around 21, 22. I think it happens for most people. The world kind of expands. You begin to understand that, oh, what I did today is not separate from that thing tomorrow. It's all one big thing. Students with Asperger's begin to get that hint, and they begin to understand that, the social realm has portions of it that I don't understand. Because then you start getting questions. And once they start asking those questions, now you're beginning to assess the social realm. At first, they seem to begin, when they start trying to assess it, that there's nothing to assess. It's literal. It's as literal as I say it is, and, it's literal because I say it is, It's that inability to put yourself in the exterior world. That's one thing I like about the population of students. They have just rich, vibrant inner lives, and they're not able to project that into a social sphere, or not with ease. And they try.
One of the things that, one of the ones I went to, they were talking about students in academic performance, that they're usually pretty good at the class of the stuff they care about. They get these obsessions about computers or, whatever they're studying. But they talked a lot about the general education requirements, the classes that everybody has to take that may or may not be their interest. What's your experience been with sort of, cajoling these people along in courses that they're having a hard time sort of getting jazzed about?
To the extent we can. We try to keep the focus on academics in our offices. Of course, that's impossible. That's just impossible because the social realm so intrudes on that for these students. I would say better than 3/4 of the students, by their sophomore year, if they can get to their sophomore year, they can run. They can begin to matriculate on. They've discovered how that can be done. Some of them will bring their syllabi to us. We try to get them to. We'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb. We'll go over instructions with them because that is a real difficulty. And this is another little difficulty I have. Well, Davis, I don't want that. Oh my God, this happens so much. I don't want to do it that way. It would be so much more interesting and look so much cooler if I did it this way. And you're thinking in your head, yes, it would. But you don't get to. You just don't get to. It's got to be done this way for a grade. And, and then you get that hateful question, why? There's no pretty answer to that. There's just not a pretty answer to that. Well, because the professor said to, and you bought this course. So what I try to get students to do, hey, I'm thinking about taking your class next semester. Could you give me a copy of the syllabi? Sometimes they don't have it ready. Then could you email me a copy? I stuttered when I went to college, and I did this for every course I took because I was freaked out about who I was going to have to speak in front of. So I really push students to do that. Then they can come to me early. We can sit down and I'll say, well, there's going to be this assignment. and this is going to have 5 parts. Well, how do you feel about following these directions? What's that going to be like for you, when you begin to organize it? I'll be glad to help you if you want to take the course. But I would think about it because you've also got this other class that you don't like. If you can do that, it's difficult because they are challenged by time constraints. And having said all this, y'all, I have to tell you, they have a freedom that I envy like a thief. I just have to tell you, they just do. That's why I like that population, and I think that's why it's so important that we at least touch on what allows us to kind of tighten their world, because that is what we're doing. We're tightening it and constraining it from what's natural to them. Most students will tell you, actually, and the first student with Asperger's I ever worked with actually told me that. I can't think like a person who doesn't have Asperger's. It is just not natural to me in any way. That's why I came to you. That's what he said. And I think that's probably the closest to the truth I've ever heard. It's an act of will to sort of curb that freedom. We all do it. We do it as a matter of, moving in society. We've been raised since birth to do it. These are students who lack that mechanism that allows us to do it. They lack that to some extent, or completely in the case of autism. Does that make sense? Okay. Let me see what else. Let me give you a copy of a faculty letter, because in the same way, leading assignments, following through, language is a fascinating thing. And if you don't know the ways that it can be symbolic, that it can be metaphorical, that it can be figurative, students sit down with it and they read, how can I put this? I can't think of an example off the top of my head, okay? But they're reading a piece of fiction, let's say, okay? And it does have a metaphorical reference in it, okay? Jack was a bear. Their first instinct, and the only instinct they have, is to picture this man as a hairy beast. That's what it says. There's no urge to take it anything other than literally. Does that make sense?
So Jack is a bear.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I have found out this the hard way, because I know I talk in metaphors all the time in my office. Well, it's kind of like if students with Asperger's can go there. They just cannot do that. They can't make those metaphorical references. They know those things literally, okay? But it just doesn't work, those metaphorical references. And so they get stuck. I think oftentimes it's called obsessive-compulsive disorder, and oftentimes it is, okay? But sometimes they just get stuck there. I mean, it's a whole new thing to just, read literally that, okay, a man is a bear. I mean, they have no other way of processing that information. Does that make sense? So I think that plays in it too. But yes, I've seen just, with lots of students. Baseball cards. Oh my gosh. Yes, enemy. And I've yet to wrap my head around completely why that is so fascinating. 2 students have told me, well, Davis, it's so obvious, what their expressions are. You're kind of told, in the enemy character, what to think, what to feel. It's very simplistic. So it seems to speak to the very things that they're not good at, I want to tell you